So I am a South Londoner from the southeast, and I grew up around London Bridge, and I grew up, in the Borough area, and Rotherhithe, near Surrey Quays, and near Bermondsey, and particularly the latter area, that was known for being extremely, extremely racist. And I lived there for like 10 years, and to be honest, I wouldn't ever say I had too many like racist encounters from white people. And actually, up until I went to university, I always kind of say the racism, in the way that we understand it, because actually racism is very much it has a complex definition, but in the simple way that we understand it, that kind of racism I experienced and prejudice was from black people. I was called a coconut, I was called an Oreo, I was called a Milky Way bar, all types of food I was called, black on the outside and white on the inside. And I think a lot of us have had those experiences, and it was, the black kids who were saying that. So, I think at the time too, I didn't really notice the racism coming from white people, because it was the subtle stuff, like being surprised that I spoke well, and being surprised that I was clever, things like that. I think my mum's experiences are more noteworthy. My mum's a learning mentor, and she worked with children with autism for a very long time at a primary school in southeast London. And the stories she'd come home with, she had there was a woman who had mixed race children, and she still, she said something like, well, everyone wants to be British, but not everybody is English. And, just kind of stupid things like that, and things like, oh, you're all right, Kay, you're not like the rest of them. And, really stupid things like that. We got that a lot. I think the story of my life was, you're all right considering you're black. And, you kind of just accept it. At that time, you accept it, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess it's a stereotype and I don't fit in it, so cool. And it's, for a very long time, that was kind of what my school experience was. That was what my experience of in that area was very much. But, I would say, personally, I very much didn't really experience racism properly until I went to university. And then I understood it's a very complex thing, and it's a complex experience. It's not necessarily people punching you in the face and beating you up because you're black. It's people saying things to break your spirit, not necessarily knowing that they're doing that, but because they're so conditioned to see you as below them. It's in their everyday parlance, it's in their everyday interaction with you, it's in everything they do and say. When they compliment you and say you are pretty, they say you are pretty for a black girl. That already says that there is a box that you fit in, or that I forced you in, and you can only really work within those parameters. And that kind of racism is very dangerous, because these people don't see themselves as racist. They see themselves as progressives. And heaven forbids that a progressive liberal could ever be a racist. They're the worst kind. Quite interesting that, all jokes aside, being called an Oreo and a Milky Bar, and actually being told once that I wasn't dark enough to be an Oreo as well, really thinking deeply about these things. I think it's very interesting, because it very much not only shows that obviously we all hold stereotypes, but it kind of shows this mentality we have in the black community, that positive things are only for white people, that to speak well and be well educated, and to want to go to a university like Cambridge University, and to like things like rock music, like I did at the time, and to just exist slightly differently, to be a vegetarian, all these things to them seemed very white, even though, hey, Rastafarianism, it advocates veganism, if anything. So again, it kind of shows a lack of education with some of these people. But yeah, these places and these comments were coming from people who clearly had a lot of self-doubt, who were clearly not, they didn't have a lot of self-esteem, and they believed what they were taught, that they were inferior, and that black people need to behave a certain way to be black, and that girls should behave a certain way and boys should behave a certain way. And it's a pity, isn't it? Because I think we're all in very different stages of life now, and we're doing very different things. And I was always, given support by my teachers, by my mum in particular, to always go forth and do what I want. If I was going to put the work in, I was never, ever discouraged from applying to Cambridge. I was never discouraged from doing anything. And I remember when I did make my application, so many people were very surprised, but they weren't surprised it was me. Because I wanted to do it, because I never knew anyone who went there. And I was like, I'll be the person I know. Somewhere like us. Because as well, the girls I went to school with, they were very clever girls, and they could have gone to those places, but they didn't want to apply because they said it's for white people. And I was like, even people like you think this way. I'm very disappointed. So yeah, 4 of us applied and 2 of us made it, and and we did it. And I very much do not subscribe to the idea that, oh, I went there and represented for black people, represented for myself. Represented for women. I only represented myself because, but in saying that, it's almost, when you speak, you almost speak for all people. When these people who have never really interacted with black people before, they meet you, to some extent, maybe you give them the impression they're going to have about all black people, which sucks, but at least make it a positive impression, I say. I don't know, you can't really know what a positive impression is, but I think we have to move beyond wanting to make a positive impression. It's not for me to validate you, it's not for me to make you feel comfortable. When I went to university, I went there to be educated, but I also think I educated some people. I say radicalised because when I went to university, you might even call me an Uncle Tom without knowing that I was, just because I very much just took on board all of the stuff that I was taught by the system. And because of what I had seen from the black men in my life and not in my life anymore, I found I had a difficult relationship with black men too, to be honest. And I think it was very positive that when I went to university, I was very much made to understand that I'm a black person, because it was something that was always drilled into me. They made jokes about the way I spoke about everything. My name isn't particularly difficult, Siana, but they made stupid jokes like that, and comments about beauty and things that I didn't fit into, and just, there were so many things. It's actually quite exasperating to begin. I don't know where to end. And it's not to say, it was such a harrowing, terrible time, but it was very much a character building time in my life. And without that time in my life, I wouldn't have had the experiences and the language in my toolbox that I need to be able to express myself now as I am. And I just don't think these views are radical. They are of common human decency, but not everybody possesses human decency, and so for them these ideas are rather extraordinary. The idea that, God forbid, women should be equal to men, and black people should be equal to white people and all the other races, and able people should be equal to disabled people, and LGBTQI people should be equal to heterosexual people. It should go without saying, and yet it's something we must constantly debate and constantly justify. During my time at university, I think a lot of it is just from white privilege. Quite frankly, these people thought they could talk to me that way, and to some extent you are complicit in your oppression, and I was complicit in my oppression because I didn't really fully understand that I was being oppressed. As I said, there were a handful of other black people in my circle, and particularly there was one guy who is a friend of mine, and he just didn't have time for my college. He spent a lot of his time outside at the other colleges where perhaps there was a higher number of ethnic minority people, and I just didn't really. And they would not dare to speak to him that way. And I wonder if also there's an element of the fact that he was a black man, and they felt they couldn't speak to him a certain way. Maybe he could make certain jokes within his circles, but with me it was very different, and I think a lot of it was to do with the fact that I was a black woman. And I think white privilege, it doesn't give a damn about your sensibilities, does it? It doesn't give a damn about your sensitivities, it doesn't give a damn about any of these things, because you are not seen as equal. And I think it's not just something at Cambridge University, of course it's not. It's everywhere. It's anywhere there is power. And it's anywhere that, we are a minority. And I think a lot of these people, they hadn't met a black person, certainly not one like me. So they were just a bit confused of how to kind of deal with me, I suppose. I really don't know. I don't think I was particularly odd, apart from my clothes perhaps, but but that's something that we just leave with the people. This is very important, this constant struggle. This struggle that you have on every front, because you're on the one hand trying to present yourself a certain way. You've got white people telling you how you need to be. And you've got the white institutions telling you how you should be. And white supremacy and white privilege talking to you, talking down at you. And then you've got black people telling you how you should be. And you get torn different sides, and I very, very much have experienced that, getting told all the time that I'm not black enough, I'm not a proper black person, and even then, when these views are shared, then white people take those views too, and they're like, oh, you're not like a stereotype, are you? And they say that so many times, that kind of nonsense is casual racism, and that is a problem, because we become numb to it and we accept it and we don't challenge it, because it's like, oh, you know, they say it all the time, it's silly, but they say it all the time. And yeah, it's really hard to be fighting every battle it is, you know, even I get tired when you pick your battles, but it is a constant kind of go between ideas of what you should be. And that's why I say, Audre Lorde said it, you have to know who you are, otherwise other people will tell you who you are. And yeah, it starts with the education you have at your home, from your parents, and then the education you go and find out there yourself, you know, in the circles that you move within. And yeah, it's really important. I think, you know, the time you know you've kind of made it is when you can look in the mirror and see yourself exactly as who you are, and that can take a lifetime. Just kind of like, you know, the whole idea of stereotypes being damaging, they obviously come from an element of truth, but the way they caricature human beings, the consequences are very deep rooted. I think one stereotype I hate the most, and one that I think is often put on me, is like the angry black woman stereotype and its variations, its many variations. This idea that black women have got attitude if they stand up for themselves. Black women are too sassy, they're difficult to deal with, uncontrollable, all these things. I remember when I went to a job interview, actually a couple of them, a question that kept on being asked was if I am manageable. And I was so deeply offended, because to me that translates as, can we control you, you know? And I was like, I've been in the working world, you know, if you look at my references, they're good references. I'm really not, you know, I work hard, I'm not a difficult person to work with, but because I feel it's because I was confident, you know, I very much knew who I was, and I went in there and I knew I was good for the job, but they just were very intimidated by that, basically. And the people who interviewed me were like basically white men between the ages of 30 to 40, and that was a consistent theme, these people that were interviewing me, and they were always asking me this question: are you manageable? Like I'm some kind of animal, you know? And in one of my workplaces, actually, there was this girl who I really don't like, and she was awful. So she's a white girl, and she was awful. She treated people like crap. She spoke to you in such a disgusting manner, but no one ever called her the angry white girl. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, it was a case of I just didn't take shit. Like if people were being misogynistic, I was going to call them out on it. If they were talking to me in a certain way I didn't like, I was going to call them out on it. Not even in a rude way, but just making it very clear that, you know, I'm not going to tolerate certain things. And for that, you know, particularly actually there was this black guy who was the ringleader in this kind of, you know, or Siana's got attitude and these kinds of things. And it was all very bizarre, but this angry black woman stereotype serves to keep oppressing us and to silence us. We cannot be ourselves and express ourselves. I think to some, you know, it's very fair to argue that black people are often quite expressive. You know, you've got Mediterranean people are the same, actually, Asian people are the same. We're very expressive people, but when we are expressive, there's something wrong with that. Sometimes we speak a bit louder, because of, I don't know, certain cultures, it's all just very different. It's all very rooted in our cultures, and we're very expressive people, and black women are often very expressive. And I think when you express yourself, you are almost so when you express yourself, you are almost punished for doing so. And that's how I felt often, actually, that I'm kind of punished. People, you know, will assume that you're mad. And actually, let's face it, there's a lot to be angry about. There is a lot to be angry about, quite frankly, and I have every right to be angry. But, you know, I'm not angry every day. But yeah, I just hate the angry black woman stereotype. I think it serves to keep oppressing us, and it serves to put a stereotype out there. And, you know, I've heard black men say, I can't date black women because, you know, they've got too much attitude and things. And like, if you say that, then why can't the Asian brother or the white brother next to you say that too? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it serves to keep dividing us. And it's just another illness in the fabric of black society. By the winners. And so you have to write yourself back into history, because now is the time to do it. We have the power to do it, and we must. It is our duty to ourselves and to our future generations.